All right, we're going to keep going here. So the second panel we're going to do today is on sales. And I think it's called The Future of Sales in an AI World. And you guys want to come on up? I will turn it over to my partner, Marg from Craft Ventures, who has quite a bit of sales experience. So why don't you?
Thanks, David. How's it going, everyone? Thanks for having us. I think it would make sense to do a quick round of intros before we get started. Does that sound good? Does everyone have their own microphone? Okay, cool. So just to kick things off, I'm Marg. I'm a partner at Craft, and I'm a former seller. So I started my career as a real estate investor, made the move to sales and worked at Dropbox, then Slack, then Clearbit, a couple of early stage bottom-up SaaS companies that I think went on to be really successful, and kind of learned the craft of selling from the ground up. And I think that AI will significantly impact the future of sales. I think we're at a really exciting time for that profession.
Hi everyone, I'm Natalie Abeysena. I'm currently the CEO and co-founder of an e-commerce AI company called Shopwise.AI. But we're basically an AI-powered personal shopper that plugs into e-commerce company websites, apps, to create a personalized shopping experience. I'm previously a founder of a company called Scope.AI, which is bought by Observe.AI, which is why Observe.AI is up there. But that was also in the NLP contact center space.
Hey everyone, it's Richard. It's great to be here. You might tell by the accent I'm British. I live in San Francisco, and I run all things product design for Otter. Otter, we've built our own large language models. They're optimized and focused on conversational data, so very much like we're having right now. We've built in our own reinforcement learning models, and TLDR, we've got about 10 million registered users, and we've transcribed, recorded, and mined about 1 billion meetings so far. And I've got some hot takes around sales, but I'm sure we'll come on to that.
The hotter the better.
Got it.
Hey everyone, I'm Nancy Dong. I'm the founder and CEO of Roster. We're a revenue operations platform building next generation opinionated business intelligence for sellers, revenue teams, RevOps teams, based in New York.
Hi, I'm Natalie Rutgers. I'm the VP of Product Growth at Deepgram. We're a speech and language AI infrastructure company powering the likes of Twilio, NASA, Spotify, lots of use cases.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. And to kick things off, I want to do kind of some polls to get a sense for how this audience is comprised. So just by a show of hands, who works in tech? And then the next one will be doesn't work in tech. So works in tech. So most people. Doesn't work in tech. You don't have to raise your hand, but it seems like most. And then next, founders versus, we'll do founders, investors, and staff. So I guess founders, show of hands. Investors, show of hands. And works at a tech company, show of hands. Very cool. And then the final one is sales versus non-sales. It seems like there will not be a lot of people in sales roles. It's more founders who oversee sales roles. What's that? Well, welcome. Awesome. Well, thank you for that. And the final one is sales versus non-sales. And does anyone work in a sales role? Cool. And a big part of the audience oversees the company, and thus go-to-market is a concern, but not something that is your only job, right? Cool. And then I guess the final one is B2B versus more of a self-serve, do-it-yourself type of model. So like B2B enterprise type of company versus self-serve type of company. Okay, I think that's really helpful. So I think the biggest question for the group is, where do you think sales will change the most as a result of AI? Maybe we start there and kind of dive in. So just what's going to be the biggest area for change?
I'll take a swing. I think in the short term, and by that I mean kind of like this year, I think AI will be, to coin a phrase, your co-pilot, and it'll just kind of sit alongside, and it'll do really lightweight tasks. So it'll help you pull meeting notes from a prior meeting, which is contextually relevant. It'll help schedule a follow-up meeting for the next week. It'll do stuff like that. I think longer term, it'll be your personal digital assistant, and it'll do really complicated shit for you. So if I'm a sales leader and I've got 100 reps, I could do a quick kind of like a prompt to say, give me sentiment analysis, positive and negative, of my 100 reps with a weighted pipeline, and that's going to be very disruptive to very established companies like Salesforce and others, I would contest.
Do you think they will be well positioned? We'll circle back to that question because I want to hear everyone else's take. But do you think Salesforce and those types of companies will be well positioned to take advantage of this step change, or do they open themselves up to be disrupted?
I mean, I think both. Honestly, they have Einstein. There's really smart people there. They're also prone to M&A, so I imagine they're kind of very focused on this. But it's moving at a click, and so they're going to have to work really hard to keep up, I think.
Cool. And just going back a question, biggest disruption to sales in everyone's view? Just curious.
I'm excited for AI to really help establish a better connection and more intuitive connection between customers and vendors. So in a B2B relationship, every single company is different. Every company is a snowflake that you're selling to, but being able to encapsulate all of that context around the customer and interject that within a seller's workflow and include things like sentiment analysis in real time is going to make these conversations way more fluid, way more effective, and not quite so salesy or like a forced upon sale.
I think the idea of like 24-hour sales is going to become a possibility because of some of the developments in AI. Historically, especially customer support had been disrupted a few years ago. I'm sure everyone sees, the chatbots that pop up. But customer support is a lot more of a science than an art. Where NLP AI is coming now, it opens up an opportunity to disrupt more of these art forms in business. So I would say sales is definitely in that category. And there might be an opportunity for there to be a 24 hours sales rep now available on every website.
Adding on, I think that sales is one of the highest turnover roles. People change jobs every 2 to 3 years, typically, and salespeople have to become experts at the tools that they're selling or helping with. And like everyone's saying, we're going to be able to arm these people with knowledge bases from day one that are giving them recommendations as to, okay, what do I need to know about this individual that I'm getting on the phone with? How do they want to be sold to? Do they just want technical details? Do they actually want me to talk about their spouse and ask them how they're doing? All of that information can be given to the sales individual so that you feel, as an end user, you could feel like you're actually getting value out of the exchange rather than just having your money taken.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed in sales roles was I always felt there was a tension between company leadership and founders and the sales team. And I think it came from sales over the years has started to, like, salaries have kind of gotten out of control. I don't know if you've all noticed that in hiring sellers. But I think that's where the tension came from. And my thesis is I think that AI will allow founders to do more with the same headcount or potentially like a little bit fewer headcount. But I also think that AI will serve as a co-pilot to make individuals much more productive. And then the other part of my thesis is there are unspoken parts of sales processes that actually do require a human, because oftentimes the person buying will very unlikely to be an AI just buying software just because. It'll come from a human need to purchase, and thus it will require human touch to do discovery, do a negotiation, make sure deployment goes well. And the fundamental reason is when you don't hit your number as a company and investors are asking questions, you can't blame AI. It's not an excuse to go, the AI was supposed to hit the number and it didn't. So we just didn't prompt it right, I guess, because we missed. So there's a lot in there, but any other spicy takes? Like, I think my spicy take is that there will still be sellers, there will still be AEs in 10 years. I still think that will be a core role. Do you all agree with that?
I mean, for sure, I do. One person's opinion, I do. I think we're going to have people have this kind of like tech support. And I think whether I'm an IC, an account exec, or if I'm a sales leader, it's going to be incredibly helpful. It's going to 10x my own contributions and that of my team. I can imagine when onboarding a salesperson, that first 30 days is critical right now. Onboarding is going to be pervasive and ubiquitous for their entire career. Like, I'm going to be in a sales call, and I'm going to get pulled in some content from a different rep answering that question in real time and giving me that relevant information. That's really awesome, right?
Anyone else?
So my hot take is that most sales teams are not ready for AI yet. Like even growth stage companies that are doing 10 million up to 100 million ARR. What you mentioned, Mike, around so much of sales data is interwoven with human input. So think about everything in Salesforce. Sorry, I'm gonna refrain from using too many acronyms, so just let me know if I am. Think about all the data in Salesforce, which is CRM, has all the records of your customers. Like so much of that is input manually by sales reps after a call, before a pipeline meeting, and that is done manually. And when we actually look at sales teams and when we onboard customers and first take a look at their data, and there are customers that we can't onboard because their data integrity and their data modeling layer is not intact yet. And there's some foundational things that need to be set right internally before you can actually prep your organization for AI use cases. So I think there are very specific AI use cases that can be implemented today, but I'm afraid that a lot of companies will be overly zealous in implementing these and thus result in just making the wrong decisions or implementing the wrong things.
I think that what we need to see happen here is actually a weaving together of the various AI tools, because I completely agree with you. Our sales team is horrible at inputting data, but this is actually why Salesforce has integrated tools like Einstein and spent a lot of effort trying to build up tools. They're trying to extract the information that does exist, but it's buried in really hard to access data sets. Conversational AI being a perfect example. And so as the tools improve that make it easier to extract data, make it parsable by machines, and then build strong language models around it, then our problems will start to be solved. So we just have to string these tools together in the right ways to solve the right problems.
There are companies out there right now doing this, right? And so they're able to do abstraction and extraction. So I can finish a sales call, qualification call, and I can be offered up by the AI part of that conversation that is a topic around authority or budget or timeline. And then that gets served to me, gets plugged into Salesforce or any other work tool I'm using. Like, that's happening like today. And so it's only going to get faster, it's only going to get better. The other point I'd make is like, business is inherently human. It's people talking to people. So I still think the AI is a facilitator, but it ain't the answer. And also the AI doesn't have great judgment, and I do think humans have good judgment. So I would lean into that also.
Yeah, one example is you don't want AI in charge of emailing people completely. You don't want to give it the keys to just spam the entire world of email addresses they could find. I think that's one example, but I think there are a bunch in sales. You probably don't want AI negotiating for you or naming its own price, or there's just a lot of things in sales that there's so much accountability in the role that it seems dangerous to fully hand the keys over. I guess shifting gears, do you think that the technology, like if you're sitting in the audience and you're a founder, you're probably thinking to yourself, what steps should I be taking to AI-ify my team and my stack? Do you think the state of technology today allows them to start making those moves, or do we need a few things to happen before it's like time to fortify the fort with AI?
So I can start on that. I think this isn't the first time, AI's come up. It's been around for 20 plus years in various, iterations of that. So even 5-6 years ago, when it was introduced into the customer support space, it wasn't like everyone lost their job suddenly. right? There is a level of like adaptation that happens within organizations. So it's been used more as a tool even today. And I guess from like a role perspective, there is a shift where instead of, so for example, Observe.AI transcribes the customer support calls, and instead of the manager manually listening to them, the ones that you hear, this is being recorded for quality assurance, someone's actually listening to those manually, filling out forms and saying, this is what you did well, you should show more empathy. So that can essentially be automated, and that creates an opportunity for the manager to have more of a relationship with who they're working with, coach them, give them career opportunities. So it's just shifting. It's more of like a cultural shift of like, what is the role of this technology as a tool versus, replacing jobs or even, at any point, I think you can get ready to start adopting it, but it'll be a tool for a while.
I also think that we'll start to see it be adopted slowly with the easiest tasks. So transcribing calls is an easy task that takes a ton of human time. What are some of the other repetitive tasks that salespeople have to do every day? Cold calling is one. We just had a founder up here who helps generate voices. That could help with that. I would love if people use generative AI to draft sequence emails and figure out the right way and quickly do a bunch of A/B testing on what actually works and resonates with users. So I think we'll see it be adopted in that way, and then as people get more comfortable and more creative with the tool sets, then they'll start bringing it on as a co-pilot in negotiation space with it kind of on their own window, helping them think about what to say next. But you have to grow that comfort with your user base, even if the tools do exist. So that's probably going to be one of the biggest hurdles, is making people comfortable enough to use the tools.
Yeah, it seems like the tools that you're already using are going to start to evolve on their own. So whether you know it or not, AI features will creep into your stack. Are there any proactive steps that people need to be taking? Like, do you need to go buy a vector database or something? Are there any other proactive steps that founders should be thinking about taking now that AI is coming at such speed?
I would say budgeting is a big part, is like starting to think about that as just another tool of the same way, everyone's using Google Workspace, like this is now going to become another line item. So just thinking about it from like expanding your tooling budget.
Yeah, I mean, if I was sat in the audience, I'd definitely be leaning into AI. I think more longer term, I would be thinking whether I want to build or buy. We use OpenAI, it's a phenomenal tool. We use it as a prototyping tool. I do not want the company's future bet on OpenAI because they could turn it off. And so use it to learn, prototype, go really quick, but our bias is we want to build, we want to own that moat and that IP ourselves and not outsource that to someone else.
I think some low-hanging fruit for founders today, a good heuristic is picking something in your workflow that is really repetitive, super time-consuming, and a machine can do better than human. So the first thing that comes to mind is basically sales call transcription and summarizing those sales calls. Like, it's something every B2B founder you're probably revisiting. Okay, I talked to this prospect, we did discovery, what were their pain points again? Like, what were the next steps? And this is actually something that Gong, which is a conversation intelligence tool, has been incorporating into their tooling for many years. So this isn't anything new, but to me, that's something where if you don't use AI or any sort of transcription or summary part of your workflow, that could really save you like 10, 20 hours a week, depending on how sales intensive your workflow is. And something like one of the biggest parts of our platform today, revenue operations platform, is we have automated win-loss analysis. So we ingest a ton of sales calls and we automatically surface the objections and primary close loss reason for discussions between sales reps and their prospects. So today, the alternative for that, and what we've heard from customers, is, oh my God, to parse out why we actually lost this huge deal. Like, the last time I had to understand this, I had to go back and forth with AEs, account executives, talk to our leadership, and it became this like 3-week super manual process to parse out reasoning and why we lost or won these deals. So that is something that can be quickly abstracted and with some amount of like human checking and post-processing at the end, and just slim that 3-week manual time period to a matter of minutes.
It's a really interesting use case because I actually think humans may be bad themselves at understanding win-loss reasons, and sometimes what a prospect tells you is the reason for not buying is not the actual reason. Have you found
That's exactly right, yeah.
The other thing that I think is pretty cool is you can now like send your co-pilot to a Zoom meeting. Like you don't actually have to be in the meeting, and then some of your colleagues in the sales team can be like running that meeting. You can be participant as like a digital assistant, and you'll get that live summary from that meeting, even though you're not in the call. So that's in market today that you can do that, which I think as a founder and CEO with visibility across your sales team, I would find that really instructive.
Yeah, I think second guess your headcount numbers because you should probably think about how much of the day-to-day tasks can be automated by other tooling.
So you see it as likely that need for future headcount diminishes as AI gets better and better?
Yeah, because I think you could pressure your team to think about, okay, you need to cut 30% of your hours and allocate that towards AI tools. How are you going to make it happen? And I think that the tools are starting to be available to make that possible. But again, it's about user adoption.
And then it's opening up beyond sales. Like sales have a really kind of clear talk track. They've got the questions. AI is really good at understanding multiple conversations that follow a single talk track. So we're talking sales today, but professional services, fintech, like down the line, any industry where there's consistent like discussion guides or talk tracks is going to get disrupted. My view.
Yeah, it's really interesting. If you're an early stage founder, we work with a lot of early stage founders who are in the early days of figuring out their go-to-market. And I imagine if there are so many founders in the audience, a lot of people are probably close to that phase where they're just figuring it out, just kind of defining their pitch. And I think generative AI will be really helpful for people in those shoes, where so much of what you're doing is happening for the first time. So there is nothing to base your next move on. So I think when you think of the term generative, I think in terms of, okay, who is our ideal customer profile? Given what we do, you can just think of these as prompts and outputs. Given what we do, who do you think is the ideal customer profile for us? And I don't know if GPT does a good job of this, but in the future, you'll say, could you generate a list of like the best 250 companies for us to target? And further from that, who are the people, given what we sell, who are the people within those companies that would make sense for me to target? And then a step further, what would make sense for me to say to them? And further, what would make sense for me to say if they don't respond to the first thing? And I think there will be a bunch of tools that do this for you. But I think the workflows are where a lot of value will accrue, because I think prompting GPT, there is a mental tax in thinking, what do I even ask this thing? And it may not have the data, like in the example that I just laid out. GPT without plugins probably does not have a good sense of companies to reach out to or people to reach out to. Those ZoomInfo might, or Clearbit might. So it'll be really interesting when all these tools can start to integrate, and you can just have this like suite of connected tools where you just start asking questions and boom, you're kind of off to the races. And it will probably be a few more months in that scenario, like where you won't have to hire your first seller. You'll be able to make it a little bit further on your own without feeling overwhelmed. But does that resonate with you all? Do you think that's likely how this plays out?
I think so. I think it's also a great startup idea. Basically, arm all of the new companies that are just figuring out how to sell with a playbook based on data from a bunch of other companies that have been there, done that. I mean, the patterns are similar enough to help you get started. So yeah, I think there's money there.
Anyone welcome to steal that idea? It's up for grabs. Anyone else? Just how does this kind of go down practically? And feel free, again, I think hot takes are my favorite area of AI, so if you have any, just feel free to shout those out at any time. But yeah, practically speaking, I think probably the most interesting thing is like, what should I be doing to start to prepare myself for this world. I guess, any tips for founders who are in those shoes?
I mean, tools that are already in your workflow. I don't know, like how many people here use Notion, right? But Notion have a chat GPT type functionality in their current product. So I would just play with it. I'd like learn from it and see if it's bringing you value to you and your team. And is it helping you make quicker, better, smarter, quicker decisions? And if so, like what other tools in your workflow might also benefit from AI? That's one suggestion. The Notion AI is pretty good.
I'd also say just experiment with it. I've been a little surprised. The second time around, I'll ask someone, be like, "What do you think is a good name for the startup?" And they're like, "Try ChatGPT," and it's shockingly good for many tasks that you might have gone to your coworker or peers to try to accomplish. You can just, at least as a starting point, I would say it's been pretty effective. So.
And it's going to it's going to require changing behavior, right? So I have purposefully I now use OpenAI as my browser. I don't use Google anymore. Like I basically, it has replaced my Google search because I want to really understand it and Bard and down the line. Because I don't want to be served up just standard Google searches. I want to really try and understand this in a very visceral way. So I might do the same thing, right? You get different answers.
One thing to caveat all this is to be really careful about the outputs too. So I think what is incredible about AI is you can generate new knowledge or tidbits that you as a human didn't detect before. So for example, with the automated win-loss analysis that we're doing, one of our customers learned that there's this new objection and loss reason that's been growing that they had no idea, that reps didn't surface up to them. They didn't realize they needed to build this thing into their product in order to overcome these objections. But what comes with like new knowledge is also you have to balance that with hallucinations and just like the output making shit up sometimes. So what's interesting is from a human standpoint, like who is going to be properly evaluating the outputs of these models? Because when we are outputting, for example, going back to the win-loss automated analysis, loss reason, here's a bunch of blobs of semantic context, like quotes, to support and explain like what's most tied to that objection. Sometimes GPT-4 just like makes up random quotes, and our customer had to point that out once. He's like, I don't think that's what actually happened in this conversation. I'm like, shit. So it's interesting because you have both sides of the spectrum. Like you have like these amazing new sources to generate new knowledge, but you have to fact check that as well. So how do you build the right checks and balances for that?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I guess my other hot take to add on to this would be just be aware that generalized models like ChatGPT will only take you so far. And I think as you get deeper as a founder or anyone in a company really, and have those little tidbits of expertise that really make up your special sauce and make you who you are, you're gonna have parts of your business where models just kind of fail you because they haven't been specialized on that knowledge. And so as you look to incorporate these tools, really keep an eye on which vendors are offering you the ability to frequently retrain and have your model update based on all the learnings that are occurring day to day. Because right now, that's just a limit of the models that are available.
Plus one to that, and also like ChatGPT is just pulling from the internet, right? I think as a sales leader, you want very curated and customizable content that you're learning from. To this point, it's accurate. So like the more reinforcement learning you can get from all the sales calls that are happening, the better and better and better it's going to be, rather than just using a tool that's pulling from the internet.
How are we doing on time, by the way? Thank you. Should we take questions from the audience? Cool. Does anyone have a question about sales or go-to-market that they'd absolutely? Feel free to.
So this is not directly related to sales, but I've been curious about, as people who work and focus on growth of the company, are you all thinking about how difficult the competitive environment is going to get for you guys? I mean, for everybody, right? I mean, the first mover advantage is more or less gone, right? Because you've got powerful AI that's available to everybody. I mean, I can access OpenAI, so does anybody else. So the quality of your output was, you're going to hire the best people, we're going to get the best tech. Now, the best tech is available to everybody, and the people part is also compromised a lot now with tech getting more and more intelligent. So how do you see staying competitive? You come up with an e-commerce AI product. It's the time for development for an e-commerce AI product has shrunk, right? Many, many, many folds. And for the other panelists here as well. So what now, as founders, owners of growth for the company, are you thinking about from a competitive advantage? One thing is you have to be on top of your tech at all times, as you said. Vendors who are, make sure they're on top of their tech, and so you partner with those vendors. But what else? Quality people, yes, but that's not such a big criteria anymore after this. So how are you all thinking about this?
Thanks for that question.
I can start. I mean, right now, I would say like the competitive, especially, I think I might be the earliest stage on this panel. I mean, it's a nightmare from the dispensability side, because you have the major incumbents thinking about, they're the systems of record. So the Salesforce, for example, or Shopify, they have all the data, they can build out models themselves, and they can build their own models. They don't need to use, ChatGPT necessarily. So you have the incumbents, you have these startups that are all fighting to be the early movers. You have a technology that's essentially becoming a commodity where the skill set, more and more, the average engineer can start to use it and build with it. I'd say there's two things that you can do to think about that. One is, in terms of the incumbent side, I think it's like finding ways where those companies don't have access to data. So for example, like what doesn't Shopify have access to, and why would that improve your model or create better outputs than what they would build out? So that's one way to think about it from the incumbent side. From the first mover side, I mean, to some degree, team is still a factor. So if you have like a PhD in ML who's working on with you, they do have some expertise and insights that makes it difficult for just anyone to replicate, and just the way they're thinking about the design of the model. But at the end of the day, it is data, so you just have to collect as much proprietary data as quickly as possible and figure out creative ways to get outputs with that. I'd say those are the two main, yeah.
I thought it was a great answer. I would add to that, just around I'm a big believer that tech's really important, but it should be invisible to the user. The user doesn't care, they really don't. And so I would, as a founder, I'd be thinking around what's our DNA that no one else can touch us on, and how do I really, genuinely, authentically understand my user? Because the big companies kind of lose sight of that, I think. And so you can really, I think, make some traction if you put the effort in to really understand who you're designing this product for. And then also just human ingenuity, right? We bring people into the office, we want to be in front of a whiteboard, we want to co-create together. The human spirit is a powerful thing, so.
Yeah, seconded on all those points. So for us, our roster, there's really two. So one is proprietary data and data network effects. So we're a pre-seed company, so we have a few customers now. Once we get to 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, et cetera, we will have enough knowledge about how different B2B companies run their businesses and their sales funnels, and we already see inklings of that. So, for example, a traditional B2B SaaS company is going to run their sales funnel very differently from a fintech company, and every single fintech company that we've worked with in their sales funnel has an underwriting stage where sometimes things move backwards in the funnel because you need to recheck some documents around compliance. And as a result, when you're looking at the sales funnel, you're constantly thinking about trading off quality and risk and the underwriting portion. So that is an example of something that we can surface and start to really understand as we bring on more customers, and be able to help all of our customers also better understand, you're a company of this size, with this sales motion, this industry, selling this type of thing. We will be able to tell you, to your point, what type of playbook you should start with, so you're not starting from ground zero. Like, you should not be reinventing the wheel. Like, company time spent should be done doing the creative things and what is differentiating, not figuring out like, oh my God, how do I friggin' implement my Salesforce instance? Like, what the hell is this? So I think that's one. And second, to your point around team, like, this is where I think team makeup becomes really important. So not just about quality, but also expertise. So it's interesting. I see a lot of teams building in the sales space that are very data engineering focused. And I think what's interesting about AI is that a lot of the infrastructure layer converges and the really interesting applications into the real world emerge at the application layer, because there's so much diversity of different products and applications you can build, and having a team that not only understands the data engineering component, but how does that then translate into business context, especially in a sales use case, is really, really critical.
Do we have time for one more question? Two or three questions, or 2 or 3 minutes? Cool. Okay,
Can
great.
I add one note to that?
Do you want to come up and ask into the microphone? Cool. For marketing use cases specifically? Great question. Are there any, so I guess part of that is, are there any marketing tools that we're all aware of? And if not, where would we expect marketing advancements? Yeah, good question. Any marketing thoughts? You stumped us.
We have frustrations, but not tools to solve them, which is more startup ideas here. So I think probably crawling all the data that we've been talking about and extracting an ever-growing list of SEO terms that you should be betting on, building the landing pages like the former founder up here was speaking on, figuring out how to create quick generative emails that allow you to A/B test what works and what doesn't. I think, yeah, these tools just haven't been put into the space yet, and there's so much frustration there. So.
Yeah, there's an emerging class of tools to generate content for social media or for an email. That's a really interesting part of the generative marketing stack. And I think when I think about companies that I've been at, the role of marketing is pay as low a price as possible per lead and basically hit the right people on Facebook and LinkedIn and Google and AdWords and that type of thing. And I do think generative AI will help you better identify the end audience, build a good lookalike list. I don't know if these tools are available right now, but I think that's inevitable. Within the next year, products will start to do that, and especially the products that you're already advertising on will probably integrate generative AI to make your spend that much more efficient and go that much further.
I would use the AI for 10% incremental improvements, more optimization of flows. I would not be looking to AI for 10x thinking.
Yeah, we have had a good, we've implemented generative AI into things like our creative assets, so generating new banner ads. I'm excited for the day when it speeds up our product design workflows in Figma. But yeah, templating and getting those quick iterations of ideas is extremely helpful, and it's just going to increase our speed to market.
Yeah. I would just add, I mean, from the merchandising space, there's a lot. I mean, this generalizes to any website, but yeah, a lot on the actual content creation, both images, like changing backgrounds, experimenting with that. There's a lot out there. Obviously, for actual writing, there's a ton of tools that have been emerging. Some even more like they're starting to become larger companies, like even in the last year or so. But yeah, I think that the experimentation part and speeding that up is going to be like a really exciting part of even existing marketing platforms.
Any other questions from the crowd?
My theory is, so like Richard has abandoned Google as a search engine. My theory is the web is going to get a lot smaller, and we're going to be interacting with LLMs in a promptable way, and so basically we'll have to have these ecosystems develop in which advertising is somewhat woven into it. Maybe it's the way that the model has been trained on certain data sets has a watermark that ties back to a certain brand, and you're kind of linked out to that experience. But I think your frame of reference of how you move around the web, there's a new user interface evolving, and so we'll have to think about it that way.
It is a really interesting question because so much of how my instinct to answer that was assuming people are going to be spending all their time on Google and clicking on ads, but that may not be the case, to your point, very soon.
Like very soon.
Yeah.
Like today.
You're not interacting with ads on Google at all.
Nope. They don't get me anymore.
That's a really good question, too. So what you're basically saying is there could be a world where you have a defender of your inbox.
Yeah,
It's a really good question.
Can I answer that? I also want to come back to the earlier question as well. I go back to my first comment around Copilot. Honestly, I think that's a lightweight lift. This is going to happen this year. Someone's going to defend your inbox. They're going to analyze it. They're going to serve it up to you as like, hey, of these 10 companies, here are the top 3. Here's the feature set. Here's how it compares. Here's the pricing. I've set schedules a meeting for these 3 founders next week. Like, that's going to happen this year. For your question, I think one of my, and this is a personal bias, but one of my not concerns, but observations around where AI might take us is it's going to be reductive rather than expansive. So actually, it's just going to take everything we already know and just reduce. And so that's going to be a really shitty world to live in, honestly. And so, like, where's the creative thinking? Where's the new thinking that's going to build these wonderful companies of the future? So that's, I think, a journey we're all going on, right?
So my instinct is when you do have your inbox defender, it'll summarize, hey, these 20 companies are trying to get in touch with you. Like, here's what each of them does. Which of them are interesting to you? So I think the job of the SDR will be to become really, really clear about your value prop so that an AI can neatly bring them to you and say, tell me which of these are interesting and get rid of the others. And it kind of underscores how I see the role of cold emailing. I think the role of cold email is not to trick someone. It's to catch someone at the right place at the right time with a very clear message so that the recipient can say, this is either something that's top of mind or get out of my face. And both are fine. But the reason that we have our team's prospect is so that you can increase the odds of that serendipity. And I think it'll just become like a world of, like, sales I don't think can go anywhere because companies have to grow and hit targets. So as your defense evolves, the offense will evolve, and forever. Like, people will always be trying. Sellers may show up to your office and just try to, hand you a box of cookies with their logo on it. I don't know, but everyone will not growing and not having control of your own destiny, I don't think will ever be acceptable. So both sides will just evolve forever, in my view. That's my thesis.
And one thing I'd add, actually, from the e-commerce example, like there's a time and place for search, and there's a time and place for AI from my perspective. I think a really clear example of this in e-commerce is like sometimes you're looking for a very specific thing, and you want the results to be narrowed down to like, here's 5 options. In other times, you want the opposite, where you want to do more of this search and go deeper in, to your point, an expansive view. So I think that, like, it'll be interesting to see, because I guess my take on it is I think there's going to be a world for both, where you need to optimize for the AI side and the SEO, depending on the use case or, and consumer behavior too.
I also think the spammy outbound emails will decline over time with AI. So, yes, thank God, I get like 30 of them a day. As AI gets more precise about here's the contact that you should reach out to at this account, which is company, with this specific message, and getting really smart about that instead of doing blanket outbound, send 200 random messages to firstname@whateverdomain.com, AI will be really helpful with that. And as sales intelligence gets better, like for example, we've discovered for our customers, there is a threshold for how many outbound emails, like repeat in a sequence, that you should send before it becomes actually diminishing returns and harmful.
What is it?
So it depends on sales. It's super dependent, but if you're a B2B company and interested, we can help you out with that. It's really interesting because as we get smarter about sales, it becomes less of this like, I'm gonna just mass advertise and send as many emails as possible and spam as many people as possible. It becomes way smarter so that you, similar to how you go on Instagram, it's like, oh, weird, how did you know I wanted to buy this thing? Very weird. It'll get smarter about your needs over time, and overall will help you make much better purchases as well. So I see a lot of analogies with like margin compression and ad tech. But yeah, super interesting, the future.
Do we have time for one more question? One more? Cool. Anyone want to ask the final question of the session? Could you say that again? I'm sorry. The most valuable company in enterprise sales, like a sales-focused company, is that right? That's like not on people's radar? Oh, that's not even started yet. Any thoughts? So like, given this AI paradigm shift, a unicorn or decacorn will be born that helps companies do what?
In sales?
Yeah, I think that's your question, right?
One for 5 o'clock cocktail hour.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Probably
Not that that's wrong. Not that that's wrong.
like a new CRM that integrates all of this workflow and insights, like Salesforce. I don't know if anyone's used it. Really, really bad.
I'd go a step farther and say, like, I guess you're kind of working on this already, but like a sales associate as a platform, and have it, kind of change the positioning so it's not a SaaS tool. It's kind of like the sales associate that you can use. Yeah.
AI seller.
Yeah, an
AI seller as a service.
Yeah. Super hot take.
I mean, I can imagine a world in which you don't need a deep bench of sales associates, and you've got like what was 100% is now 10%, and they're using judgment surfaced by the AI to close deals and land and expand.
It is interesting to think about cloning your best seller. I think it's going to be very hard. No, I'm sorry, not literally. I mean, in a digital sense, to take the humans that are really good at selling your product and replicate that.
I mean, it's compounding, right?
Yeah.
So rather than having 100 individuals that are all looking to sell, I've now got 100 people that are all compounding, learning from each other through the AI, and everybody is getting exponentially better every single day.
Yeah.
Sales army. Sales army.
I would put it into your employment agreement if you're a seller. That is kind of what happens today, is we are all learning from you, and your best practices do belong to the company. So I don't think it's a huge stretch. Maybe not like, you wouldn't want to have like a Coachella hologram of that person's face, but I think the best practices that they unearth are probably owned by the company, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, some of our enterprise clients want to opt in to our platform, and they're happy for us to run our models on their data sets to improve our models, and some candidly are not, and they want to sit outside in a sandbox, and that's totally fine, right? But just be kind of open and be transparent about what you're doing and what you're learning and why you're using the data.
Well, should we wrap? Cool. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
All right, so we're going to take a 15-minute break right now, and we'll start the last panel. Let's call it at